Hello and welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to continue my series on soundboards, and I'd really like to open up the world of audio for streamers to improve their sound as much as possible. I know a lot of people who are using soundboards, they're just using them to drive their microphone and nothing else. And one of the biggest advantages of using a soundboard is actually being able to mix your stream live. But in order to do this, you're going to have to utilize what's called the stereo channel inputs on your soundboard. The previous video, we looked at the XLR inputs, which is what's going to drive your microphone, and the advantages and how to set up your microphone and how to look at the channel strip. Today we're going to look at the other kind of input that you've got on your soundboard, hopefully. If you've got a good soundboard, or one of the ones I recommend, it's going to have 4 stereo inputs, which is really important because this is where you can add 4 USB sound cards and mix them for your stream and hear everything in real time. So, we're going to continue looking at the X1832. This is still applicable for other boards and smaller boards. They should all have 4 stereo channel inputs. If you have one of the smaller boards, you're not going to have this EQ section, and you may only have an FX send instead of the aux out and the FX send. And so this section of the board in the middle here might be very limited if you have a much smaller board. So just keep in mind that you may not have these knobs for this EQ, and you may not have more than just one send. So these are the send channels. And you may have a knob for this bottom section, which is the fader section. But overall, these inputs are relatively similar to the microphone. You just don't have compression and you don't have a gain. The gain is manually set, and you can toggle the gain with this button right here. You can have 2 different line level inputs. So this basically is going to increase the loudness, but it can also increase the noise. And the other thing you need to know, instead of having an XLR, this top section is going to have a left and a right input. Okay? So this is where you would plug in a USB sound card using some sort of analog audio cables like RCA to 1/4-inch adapters, and you'd get a left, and you could see them labeled with little L and R, left and right channel input. This will give you a stereo input, and you could have each one of these. So you've got 1, 2, 3, 4 for your stream, and each one could be like Windows Audio, Discord, Game Sound, Alerts. These each could be their own channel, and you could control them individually. On the top here, these 4 inputs right here are also inputs. They do not have any kind of control like you would see on this strip here going from top to bottom. There's no EQ, there's no sends, there's no pan, and there's no fader, except for on some boards you may actually have a little knob that's like this little knob right here. This little knob right here actually controls this input. So you do get some volume control on that one. Whereas the number 2 input underneath is just a straight volume in. You have no control over it. You'd have to have external control. It would be fine to plug in maybe like your phone, and you could turn the phone volume down on the phone, and then it would change it in the soundboard. But these 4 channels down here, you notice that they're all labeled like 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. That's how you know they're stereo inputs. Whereas the mic inputs will only say like 1, 2 of a single digit number. Looking at the rest of the board, this side you've just got a main EQ. Your board may not have this. And you've got an FX. So this is FX controls. Your board may not have this. If you have a really simple board, you may not have effects. If you do, there's a list right here of all the audio effects processors. You just match the little number up with what's written in the list. And this is the volume control for that. This also controls the volume and where it's being sent, these little buttons. So, and you would adjust the reverb or the effect on each channel with the little Send FX yellow knob. It could be a red knob on your board. It could be a white knob. Just make sure you read the label. This little section right here is where you would control your headphone volume. You'd plug in headphones into the board at the top where it says phones right here, and you'd control whether you're hearing the submix or the main mix. We talked about that in the last video. Basically, you can choose to send each channel to 2 different outputs, and you can decide whether or not you're listening to that right here. If you're streaming with one of these boards, there's these 2 red buttons that say USB 2-track to main. If you push that button, on most Behringer boards, if you push this little 2-track to main button, you will lose the output of the board and sacrifice it to hear a return channel from the computer. The Soundboards return channel is a USB sound card that you can hear, but you will lose the connection to OBS or as an input for mixing for most boards. Some boards will allow both ways, but I don't remember which ones they are, and I just say, just don't worry about it. Don't use it at all. Just leave the little red button depressed. Your main mix is your final mix out volume, and you'd want to set that to the little 0. So this is the main output, and this is what's going to OBS. And that's it. Up here, you've got your sends, and on this board, we've got a mon out, which would be this top red knob. This is where you could send, if you wanted to send your music to Discord, it wouldn't be in stereo, but you could send it over your mic channel using the main monitor out. So we're going to talk about more of that later in another video, how to set up your soundboard so that you can send your microphone to a separate sound card, and I will walk you through all of that. So hopefully this mess right here lets you see kind of what's going on with the soundboard. Between the last video and this video, if you really just break it down to what's going on, there's not that much happening on the board. Your board may have more or less features, typically not too much more than this, and not too much less than this, to be honest. So if you're looking for a soundboard, 2 videos ago, I did a board overview on which boards I recommend for streaming. So if you're looking for a good budget-friendly board or maybe a little bit more advanced board, you can go over to that video. I'll link it in the description. I hope this is helpful. If you have any questions about soundboards, I will be doing more of these in the future. The next video, I'm going to be going over the aux send output, how to send your microphone out of the soundboard. Video after that's going to be how to set up sound cards and plug everything into the soundboard for these stereo channels that we just went over so that you can mix with separate sound cards. And the last video, I'll be going over some little extra stuff here and there, the most important equipment that you need to get to make your soundboard sound as clean as possible and maybe even expand it with some extra inputs. So look forward to that. If you want to see more, please let me know. If you have any questions, leave a comment, like, subscribe, all that business, and I'll see you guys in the next one.